So also if I want to print a stack trace, I'll say e dot print stack trace, and it will gonna print the stack trace. If I run it, so it will gonna say that array is at this line, error is at this line, and this is the exception that occurred, array index out of bound exception, right? So basically, if we talk practically about Selenium, how we're gonna implement this exception handling is, let's say I'm working on any website. Let's say I'm onto gmail.com, and on gmail.com I'm validating my home page. Let's say on this website I'm validating whether all the elements exist on the home page. I'm entering some username, password, and clicking on sign in, and in between what happens is that let's say I have located this element, and next time when I execute my code, this element found missing on the page. Then my code will Selenium code, when I execute it, it will not gonna find this element, and it will gonna throw an error. So as soon as there is an error, I'll put my entire code inside the try block, and as soon as there is an error, it will go inside the catch block. It will gonna handle that exception. What I'll do, I'll generate a screenshot at that point of time, and I will then send a mail with attached screenshot, and will also print the will also mention the error message in the subject of the mail, in mail subject. So this thing I will be doing, this logic I'll be writing inside the catch block, so that as soon as there is an error or exception inside my code, then it will go to the catch block, it will capture the screenshot, and will send the mail accordingly. Now these are the examples that we have seen are for the runtime exception that occurred during the runtime. If there is an error, then it will go inside the catch block, and it will gonna handle that exception. Now there are some caught and uncaught exception. Let's say if I talk about a method, if I talk about a class that is thread.sleep. So thread.sleep, and if I give some let's say 1000 milliseconds, which is like 1 second, right? So this is inside try catch block. Let's say if I don't have this try catch block over here, or let's do it in another class. Let's create a new class, and I'll give it a name as caught exception, and over here, let's say I have the same code. I'll copy it from here. I have the same code, and I'll write thread.sleep. Basically what this thread.sleep will do, it will gonna halt the execution of my program for 1 second. Now you can see error line over here. If I take my mouse over here, it's asking me to add throws declaration. Basically, whosoever has made this sleep method, he has made it compulsory for a user who is accessing this sleep method to add this statement inside a try catch block. So if I add it inside the try catch block, then you can see that the error is gone, right? Or what I can do, if I move my mouse over here, I get another option, that is add throws declaration. And now when I click on it, you can see interrupted exception has been added with my main method. Alright, now let's say if I don't add this, and keep it inside the try catch block only, right? sorry, keep it inside the try catch block only, right? So next time after this code, let's see if I have to use this thread.sleep again, and let's say for 1 second, one more second after some line of statement, then I again need to add this try catch block. I again need to surround it with the try catch block. Then again, if I am adding this thread.sleep again, then again I have to put it inside the try catch block. So it means that the n number of times I will be using this method, I'll be calling this sleep method, I have to surround it with the try catch block, right? So the other alternate, let's say if I have to call this thread.sleep 50 times in my code, then 50 times I have to surround it with the try catch block, which is not feasible, right? So what I'll do, the other thing over here that you see, that is the add throws declaration, which we added it just before this. So if I click on this, then now there is no need of the try catch block. So now, as like whenever I write this thread.sleep, I will not gonna get that error. It will not going to ask me whether whether this is surrounded with a try catch block or not. Now this interrupted exception, it's a child class of the exception class, and this throws is a keyword that will helps in throwing the exception that is built inside that class. Now same thing, I mean this is a caught exception. This is an example of a caught exception. Let's talk about some uncaught exception. Let's create some exception by our own. Let's say I'll create a new class and give it a name as uncaught exception, and over here let's say if I have to create a new exception, then I'll use a keyword that is throw new exception, and give some message over here like error occurred, right? So this is how I can create an exception of my own, and I can either surround it with a try catch block or click on add throws declaration, and when I execute it, this will gonna throw this exception that I have created of my own, right? So this is also most of the time been asked in the interview, that what is the difference between throw and throws in exception handling. Now last thing we're gonna study in this exception is about the finally block. So what I gonna do, I create a new class for it, and finally block. Now what happens is, let's take a scenario in which, let's say I have a try block. In this try block I have created some database connection, and let's say I am firing some queries, executing some queries, and then validating the data and comparing with my websites in order to perform some database testing, validating the data and comparing from website, and let's say after that I'm closing this connection, right? And then after the try block, let's say I have a catch block over here in which I have written a code to caught the exception E, right? So in this catch block I am just printing the exception, right? So let's say error occurred, Now what happens is that let's say if the database connection is done successfully, it is successfully connected to the database, and while executing some queries an exception occurred, right? There was some exception that got occurred in case of executing the query. Then what will gonna happen is that the other code will not be executed and the control will directly go to the catch block, right? So what will gonna happen, the database connection will still be established, and in my database I have some condition that in that particular database only I have provided at same point of time more than 2 users cannot be logged in, right? So at this point of time, if the database connection is not closed, then it will remain as active, right? And when I'm again try to connect to that database, then it will throw me an error. It will throw me a validation message that there are more number of users already connected to this database, so you will not be able to connect to this database, right? So what I will do to handle this sort of situation, that no matter whether there is an exception over here, I mean I want that my database connection should be closed after everything is executed in this code. So what I'll do, I'll put a finally block over here and write the code for closing the DB connection, right? Now no matter whether this try block is executed successfully or not, or whether there is an exception and it has gone to this catch block or not, this finally block will gonna execute all the time, right? So let's say if I add this code over here for generating the exception, right? Exception is occurred, and after this I'm trying to close the DB connection over here in try block, and then over here I have written it in finally block, and then when I execute this, as soon as I execute this, you can see it has gone to the catch block and closing the DB connection in the finally block has been executed, right? And if there is no exception, if there is no exception in the try block, then also when I run it, then you can see this finally block is always executed, right? So it doesn't matter whether there is an exception and whether the code is successfully executed in the try block, this finally block will gonna execute all the time, right? So in interviews there are sometime it's been asked that what is the difference in final and finally, right? So people generally might get confused. I mean, many of the time people get confused that what is a difference in final and finally. So finally is used in the try and catch block with exception handling. And if I talk about final, let's say if I say final int x equal to 100, and then I try to change this value of x from 100 to let's say 200, then this will give me an error. This will give me an error and say the final local variable cannot be assigned. It must be blank or not using a compound assignment, right? So which means that if I have prefix the final keyword with any integer or any value, then that integer value cannot be changed, right? So this is the difference in final and finally. So final has nothing to do with the exception handling, right? So I'll remove it from here. Alright, so also while working with Selenium, we won't be using this class exception E. Rather, what we have used earlier, we will be using the throwable class, which is a super class of an exception and an error, so that, I mean, we never knows that there might be an error that occurs or there might be exception that occur. So if we have used this throwable class, it will gonna handle both error as well as exception. Because if I write error over here, then the exception will not be caught, and if I write exception over here, then the error will not be caught. So it's better that we should be using the throwable class, which is the super class of error and exception. So that's all we have in exception handling. More of its usage we're gonna see when we will practically work on Selenium RC or WebDriver. We're gonna practically see how we're gonna implement this try and catch block and the exception handling over there, right? So that's all for now. We'll meet again in next module. Thank you.